Well, thank you all for coming back. We have an exciting talk next about virtual production from Michael Alfar. Michael is one of the many pioneers in the media server-driven virtual production revolution. Working closely with White Light, they developed the very first smart stage for the award-winning Magic Cube, Eurosport Discovery. During the COVID pandemic, Michael co-starred in the very first XR stage in Belgium and kept producing and delivering virtual design and consultancy for various international virtual productions. Some of Michael's work is displayed at the Ross School of Business in their virtual production studio, which was the very first commercial smart stage produced and delivered by White Light. We are excited to welcome Michael to the summit. Thank you.
Yeah, you just took 2 slides of mine the way you are.
Sorry.
Anyway, hi everybody. So we're going to be talking about virtual production for mostly film and broadcast, so something else completely different from VR applications. We've got half an hour, and I'm going to spend a fair few minutes of that making you watch some videos, which is always fun. Just a little roster here. These are being recorded, so we're just going to go through, who I am, a couple of videos, talk about the difference between 2D, 2.5D, and 3D. Looking at a couple of LED volumes, what a frustum is, and how do we light in an LED volume, very important. And then the pipelines, and then we're going to be looking at motion AI just a little bit, because some of the previous talkers have done that a lot better than I have, and looking at some holodeck stuff and the NERF stuff. So basically looking ahead to what's being rolled out. I run Mouth Media, which is a very small design company based in the UK. We are specialized in AR and content design, AR and XR content design, AR production, XR consultancy, and VP supervisor. We'll touch on VP supervisor later on in the talk. I'm going to make you watch a small video of anything that's been created in XR over the past couple of years, mainly with our friends from White Light. So everything in this video is shot in an XR volume, meaning the floor and walls and set extension. Of these have been shot over the past 2, 3 to 4 years in XR volumes, as I said, mostly with our partners from White Light. And as Jeremy said, the very first commercial XR stage ever was right here in the Ross Business School. So these guys came out to IBC, I think it was in 2018, and saw the potential and said, we want one. And that's how the ball got rolling, and then it spread out all over the world. But to be fair, and I'm not exaggerating, the very first one, that was us right here on campus. And then they loved it so much, they've now installed the second one. So there's 2 of these volumes up at the Ross Business School, and it's very exciting to see how they take this forward and use this technology to get their lessons and their colleges to a next level. And then there's another one coming, just down the road, which is very exciting. So yeah, it's fair to say that you guys are trendsetters when it comes to using XR and not being afraid to use it. So I always say XR is VR without the goggles, because you can see people in the environment. You're not separated by this solo experience of wearing a goggle. And then VP, which is what we're going to talk about today, is XR without the LED floor. So basically, this is an XR stage. You've got your LED walls and a floor. You've got your set extension, and that creates your whole picture. And then for VP, mostly used is basically a wall, potentially some side walls, and then the real world set. So there's not often used with a virtual, with an LED floor, because there's some issues with the floor, issues is not the right word, some limitations when it comes to virtual shadows and reflections. Now, Move AI is coming to the equation, and so the virtual shadows will be solved very, very soon. But VP, to my experience, they don't like, in film especially, they don't like the floor because it's missing that grounding, and it has an effect on the color. So that's why I say VP is a wall, some set extension, but no floor. So virtual production, you can read the text on YouTube later, but it's green screen without the green, and it allows content creators to see the environment that they're working in. It allows actors to feel at home in the set. It allows directors to work with actors feeling more at ease rather than just looking at a green screen. And it uses this natural lighting and the natural reflections that come off the LED volume, which is so important when it comes to creating in-camera VFX. Good news is there's another 2-minute video coming up, but this is something that we've got. So we run our own little VP studio over in Belgium, and it's going well. We've done a few demos, we've done a few commercial projects, but this video that I'm going to play you now kind of shows really well what the added value is of a LED-based virtual production studio. So this is what you guys are building just down the road, some similar type of stage. Before we go into that, I just want to have a quick comparison between 2D, 2.5D, and 3D. There's three possible solutions for a virtual production workflow. Again, this is all a personal opinion, so you guys might think different, and we'll happily debate that. But for me, the 2D workflow is it's basically projection. There's no tracking going on. It's basically just a backdrop, which works well when the camera is positioned in the right angle. There's a lot of advantages there. It's low complexity, systems simple, pre-production simple. It's either projection or an LED. You've got minimal crew and build time. You've got minimal testing needed, and the content creation can be done in a wide variety. You can have pictures, you can have footage that you've shot yourself. It doesn't have to be real-time 3D content. There could be wins, which I say, they need a bit of money, but the problems are, it's a tough word, that problems, but limited adjustments during the shoot. You can't really, when you go with pre-rendered content and the director says, I don't like it in daylight, I want it in nighttime, you're basically, screwed. You need to go and re-render this thing. So that's the difference between real-time and pre-rendered. You don't have any depth, you don't have any parallax, you have no tracking, basically you have no flexibility. So for certain solutions, the 2D workflow is going to be your way out, mainly budget and time restricted. It's used quite a lot, and we'll look at another example about a car plate in a minute. The next step up is the 2.5D, which is kind of the after effects of virtual production workflow. So it's in between the 2D and the 3D. So where the complexity starts to get a bit larger than for the 2D workflow. Still projection or LED, your crew starts to build up a little bit. You have to build the system a little bit before, so you're already needing a pre-production day. Whereas in 2D, you could just turn up in the morning, set it up, color it, and then you're shooting. You could potentially do this with camera tracking, advisably with camera tracking. It's 2D disguised as three dimensions. So the camera tracking, again, it's a pro, but it's also a con, because it needs time, it needs crew, it needs money. You've got more flexibility, but you're still limited. You still cannot change your content on the fly. What you can change is your parallax, your depth of creating your different fields of view. This is where you start needing a media server, you start needing timelining, and it's added value, but at a cost compared to 2D. Your 3D workflow, which is the one that I prefer, is obviously because it's got your maximum flexibility. You're doing a real-time content piece, you're tracking in real time, and because it's real-time content, you can change anything and everything that you want on the fly. You can change it from day to night, you can move the trees around, you can move the road around. Director comes in, has had a bad night, doesn't like what you've created, wanted yellow bricks rather than red bricks. All of these are things that you can change on the fly. Obviously that comes at a massive cost, not only in budget, but also in time, in crew. You've got to work with virtual lighting. You've got to continue that virtual lighting into the real world. If the sun is coming from this angle in your virtual world, your DOP needs to continue that lighting onto the subject or the actors, otherwise it just won't gel together. The downsides to that is it's extensive pre-production and planning. It's not simple. Nothing is simple in virtual production, and nothing is simple in XR. So you need to think about these things long beforehand. You need to do your storyboarding, you need to do your shot list, you need to think about what lenses you're going to use, because once you start shooting outside your volume, this is when you need your set extension. And so there's a lot to be taken to take into account. You need extensive resources. You need servers, you need matrices, you need trackers, so it's quite costly doing this, but it obviously gives you the best possible result and the best possible flexibility. For that to work, like in a VP workflow, as in an XR workflow, there's a lot of moving parts, and they all need to sync up. One of the main elements is the exact location of your mesh. Your LED mesh is so important. A lot of people forget that. Or they'll put an LED wall in and say, hey, there's the wall, let's shoot. But if you want to track it, and if you want to accurately project onto the LED wall and have your set extension seamlessly connect into your LED wall, you need to know exactly what inclination. There is no single LED wall which is a perfectly straight line, horizontal and vertical. Everything torses a little bit. If it's not with heat, it's the weight. So all these panels are not 100% 90 degrees. What we always do is when we have made a change to a wall, we have it scanned, and then that gives you an accurate 3D mesh. You put the 3D mesh into your media server, and that's how you get a correct projection of your camera frustum onto the LED wall. This is our current LED setup in our studio over in Belgium. So we've got a curved main wall. It's not the biggest, but the question is, do you need big? Like, the bigger, the more pixels you need to render out to, the more machines you need, the higher the cost. And this is where, right now, we're still a bit in that zone of production companies not willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to go into the largest volume. I love seeing the largest volumes in the world. I just don't see them commercially being interesting at this point in time. So smaller volumes are quite interesting because the rental price of that per day is still in the zone of where a producer doesn't have a heart attack and thinks, yeah, we can do this. What else? You see the top screen there, that's just a light filler. It's a very low res, you couldn't shoot on it, but it fills in the natural light. And the two side screens as well are mobile, so you can move them in and use natural lighting as a source of light. We'll look at an example of that in a minute. But before we do, I want to talk about the frustum. So the frustum is the area that the lens, I know there's a more scientific explanation for that, but for me, it's the area that the lens projects onto the LED wall. This is the little bit that you see moving over the wall. This is what we call the frustum. The frustum, when you're in a wide angle, that frustum is a lot larger. When you're zoomed up, when you're in a close-up, that frustum is small. So if you didn't have anything else on your LED wall, you would have a lot of black, which then defies the whole need of the whole theory of using natural lighting and natural reflections. That's why we often double up, so we have another perspective that we fill the whole LED volume in, that gives us that natural lighting, which is of the same scene, not necessarily the same angle, but of the same scene. So if the scene's blue sky, then we fill the LED with blue or something akin to a blue sky, so that that light spill helps us out with making it more real. This is a setup here. So as you can see, the darker part in the middle is your frustum. That's what your camera projects onto the LED. That could be, depending on the lens you use, it's narrow or it's wide. Then you fill in the rest of your LED volume on the lighter gray areas. And then everything outside that, even the roof, everything outside that gets covered by set extension. Basically, an AR overlay that fills your entire image with your CGI content, and where your LED is, it kind of cuts a hole in that, and that's where you put your actors and your speakers, and that's the whole principle of XR. You know, if you want to see that at work, I invite you to go up to the Ross campus and have a look there how that works. They've mastered that to perfection. The frustum here is quite nice. This kind of shows you how the frustum glides over an LED wall with the camera. You can see the camera move, and that drives that frustum. Now you can see perfectly well that the background layer isn't necessarily the same angle as the frustum, but it's kind of in the same angle, and that's all you need, because whatever's outside frustum isn't being recorded. It's only what's inside frustum that's being recorded on tape. So you can put anything you want outside there, as long as it gives you that same look and feel that you're looking for to kind of fill in the rest of your space. So let's talk a little bit about lighting in LED volumes, and the key word here is less is more. We often get productions in and they bring a whole truck, and the truck is loaded with tons and tons and tons of lighting, because, hey, we're going to need all that. And we always say, you won't. And then they say, well, what do you know? You're just, it's fine. Let's shoot it. And then as soon as they start shooting, they start putting away these lights, because the LED volume itself is a huge light box, and it has your content. So if there's contrast in your content, if you go from day to night, you drive in and out of a tunnel, the LED volume reflects that. There is no better way to simulate that than using LED screens to create your lighting. So a couple of tips for the lighting people in the room, if there are any. If you're ever working in an LED volume, you've got to understand that you're not in a green screen. So don't light it like a green screen. Use the content, use the output of the LED volumes to generate your main source of light. It won't give you a hard shadow. You'll still have to simulate a hard shadow if you want to extend the sun. But 80% of your lighting is done by your content and your LED volume. You know, use natural lighting. Be smart with your reflections. That's why you have an LED volume. Use the reflections, if there's any reflections to be used. Don't be afraid to move that mobile screen in right up to here, because you know this is your frame. You can move it in and get the best possible reflections. You're working in a really big light box, and a lot of people tend to forget that. This is a huge light box. There's no need to hang 20 space lights in the ceiling and then cover them off with flags. There's absolutely no point in doing that. I'm not talking big Hollywood productions. I'm talking, you know, medium-sized productions like the ones that we're working on. Extend your virtual lighting, move it into in your Unreal world. If the sun doesn't suit you coming from that angle, or you know the camera, the DOP doesn't like it, then you just move it around and move your real world lighting around as well. And if possible, I would advise to use RGBW soft lighting, so you can have that little extra element of white, pure white, to mix it into your colors. This is and we're going to watch a little video again. This is a setup of a car plate that we did in our studio last summer. There was no lighting involved, none. Basically what they did was they just covered off the top screen to not cast the direct reflections on it, and then they used a huge butterfly screen in front of it to create lighting. So everything you see in the next video is pure LED lighting. Absolutely pure LED lighting, and I can talk over it because there's no music on this one. So it was a French film, and they had 4 car scenes, and they realized really late in the project that they couldn't possibly logistically get the whole team from the French Alps to Paris, back to the motorway. So there were 3 or 4 very different scenes spread over France, and they only had a week to shoot. So they came to us. We got them the car plates from a guy that we worked with in LA, he's mounted a very clever 9-camera system on his car, and he's driven all around the world and has captured all of these things. So everything you see here is basically that car plate on the LED volume. And if you look at how the lighting inside the car changes with the landscape, there's no way that you can recreate that with any sort of softbox. This is the purest form of lighting, and this is the best form of lighting for single camera virtual production shoots. There's a lot more to talk about, but you only have 30 minutes, so we should do a whole conference on lighting for LED volumes. We'll do that next year. Let's quickly jump into the pipeline, because we had to make choices when assembling this talk. A typical pipeline for us in a VP is you've got your traditional movie hierarchy, you've got your producers and your writers and your directors and your DOPs, and that all stays the same. But then you've got a VP producer, because certain sequences of a film will be shot in a VP studio, and there's a VP producer that will organize that for you. He's in charge of your VP shoot. He's typically not from the studio, but he knows exactly how a studio works. Under that VP producer, you've got your VP supervisor, which is me, and then you've got a technical director who runs the whole technical side of things. And then you've got your Unreal artist. Now, I keep calling it Unreal. Unreal is a fantastic tool. I've been recently made aware that there's going to be a huge shake in the world, 23rd of June, when Apple make a big announcement. So let's call it Unreal Unity going forward. So the Unreal artist usually works for the movie company, for the production company, because you use that same file to do your previs and your storyboarding. So that's a thing that comes up in the next slide. So your Unreal artist is usually engaged by the movie company because, long before they get to you, they've been talking about this film and they've been thinking about this film and they've been dreaming up all these scenes and modeling these scenes. So these people, by the time they get to you, they've got this film in their head, and so you just have to help them make that. The Unreal artist then hands over the file to the Unreal integrator who works for the VP studio. So the Unreal integrator makes sure that this file is flawless. This file runs at the required frame speed. It runs at the resolution is set. If there's things that need to be cached out, he makes sure that the file will be ingested by the media server without any issues, because the last thing you want is showing up on the shoot day and saying, oh, well, the computer can't handle it, because then you've got real problems. Apart from that, we have a media server operator who then gets the file from the Unreal integrator and makes sure that that file actually shows up on the LED when it needs to show up on the LED in the section that it needs to show up. You've got your system engineer, your tracking engineer, a video engineer, and an LED engineer. There's a lot of engineers on a VP shoot. So this is kind of your basic hierarchy that you need to run a VP studio. Obviously, you can always do it with less, but we tend to advise you not to, because when you're on the stage and there's 50 people there and everybody's costing a huge amount of money, then you do not want to lose any time. And if there's an issue, you have to have the right person there to go and fix that issue. Did I skip one? No. So the VP supervisor, what does he do? So he leads the virtual production studio team. He's a bridge between your virtual producer. Remember, he works for the film company. He's not necessarily known with your studio, but he knows about VP. And then you've got your VP World, which is your team. You've got a very close working relationship with our department, because I've sat in creative meetings with film people where if you just let them do what they want to do, they'll reinvent the whole world. And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you've got to rein them in and say, well, it's a great idea. We can't really do it that way, but what about that way? So that's kind of the role of a VP supervisor, help them get to where they want to go in ways that are realistic and doable. He's a consultant to the film director, not always, but you'll find that film directors tend to get, the good directors anyway, they'll get an interest of what's going on, because they want to use this technology to become better storytellers. And for them to understand what's happening, they'll come and they'll talk to you and they'll want you involved sooner. So that's when the best results are delivered, when everybody's kind of on the same page and everybody takes an interest in each other's work. And that's not easy because, VP, it's something new and everybody talks about The Mandalorian. Yes, it's a fantastic product, but that's not mainstream. That's an exception to the rule. So for that to work, you just need to communicate with each other, and you need to be getting involved in the early stages. So if there's any producers in the house, get your VP team involved in the early stages. Don't wait till the last minute, because it'll cost you more and it'll not be as productive. The pipeline, how does an Unreal file, Unreal/Unity file, travel going forward? So your art director has a sketch, he's got an idea in mind. That then kind of translates into an Unreal/Unity file, and that's your Unreal artist or your Unity artist that starts creating that file. That same file travels all the way through the film, from pre-production stage up to post-production stage, because in pre-production, seeing as the file's there and seeing as you're going to be shooting in that file, why not use it for your storyboarding? Why not start using to cut your shots? Put the right lens on your camera, have a look at it, put an avatar or a meta-human in the stage, and have them react the way you expect your actors to react once you're shooting, and do your shot list. When you get the lens right and you get the sensor size, once you get on stage, your result on stage and your previs should be 1-for-1, because there's no reason, if you've got your mesh, you've got your lens, you've got your sensor size, if all these parameters are correct, what you're going to shoot on stage is 1-for-1 what's in the previs. So that same file is now being used to cut your story together long before it leaves the office. Then that same file gets handed over to the VP studio. We use it to shoot it. And then that same file goes to post-production. So how does that work? So you've got your file. It goes to your integrator. It goes into your media server and onto your LED. We've established that. The LED gets shot by your camera, that's your raw footage. Your camera shoots your actor and your LED stage. On the side, you've got your camera tracking. That camera tracking gets recorded. So now you've got the footage that you've shot on stage with your camera, you've got your camera tracking, and remember, you still have your source file. So you could go in post-production, integrate your camera tracking onto the Unreal file, and then you can start cutting and pasting things that you're missing. And I got a feeling I've got to wrap up here, Jeremy. Is that what you're? Yeah, can I just quickly, very quickly, I want, so basically, where does AI come into place? Motion AI, please go and see Ray about this again, because it's very interesting to create virtual shadows. Like when you've got an avatar of yourself, Motion AI will give you a copy of yourself in virtual world, which will then create virtual shadows, which is the missing link at this point in time between making it real and making it look like it's, what is it? Not going to play the video, unfortunately. The other one is holodecks. Holodecks are, look, this is a 30-second video. Can I play it?
And again, sort of how these panels
This is
work.
so exciting.
Ones that are working today, you can stitch those together. In fact, at Leica Lab, they've actually started to put two and more of these together, and the more you stitch together, the further out you can project the holographic objects, and that goes all the way to infinity. So you can eventually imagine buildings, instead of having LED video walls at LAX, you can actually have true holographic portals, and it will look real. It will look like you're looking out of a window, or maybe even better, looking at reality. It's fantastic technology, and ultimately, we are so close to this becoming real that the holodeck isn't, it's not even decades away. It's this decade. It might be expensive for the first half of this decade, but by the end of it, I don't think it will be. I think it'll be, the cost of a very high-end home theater system to get something like this running in your home.
So the volume is low, but what he says is in this decade, holodecks will become affordable. Now that's exciting, and we shall have another talk about that next year to see where they are. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've got to.
You want to wrap me up our final?
Well, just very quickly on the neurons radial field. It's basically this is exciting. This is the new, everybody's talking about photoreal content that you want in your XR stage or your VP stage. NeRFs, as they're called, NeRFs are the answer to that. So basically, you make a bunch of pictures of something, and then your AI will create a photorealistic 3D model. NVIDIA, you've got to love them. They put out fantastic videos on their conferences. We're a long way away of making perfect NeRFs, but we're getting there, and it's going really, really quickly. So you just go out, make a bunch of pictures, run it through an AI module, and it gets you a 3D, photorealistic 3D model of the world that you will be shooting in, and then, the possibilities are endlessly. And with that, I'm really going to just wrap it up and just kind of, that's it.
Thank you.